Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I was grateful when I landed a position at a small local restaurant. At first, everything seemed okay. The hours were long, and the pay wasn't great, but I was learning and gaining experience. That was until about 2 weeks ago when things took a turn for the worse. I was standing by the clock and screen, getting ready to start my shift, when my boss approached me. He had this weird grin on his face that made me uneasy. He told me he needed to talk to me about something. When I asked what it was about, he explained that when the restaurant was slow and there was nothing to do, I needed to clock out. Confused, I asked what would happen if we got an order. He casually replied that I could clock back in then, or if I found something else to do. Was he seriously asking me to work for free? I questioned if I was supposed to just sit there unpaid when there was nothing to do. He responded with a smirk, saying there was always something to do. He started listing off random tasks. Scrubbing things in the basement, cleaning obscure areas, stuff I'd never been asked to do before. It felt like he was making things up on the spot. When I pointed out that these tasks weren't part of a cook's job, he simply said they were now. We're a small business, and we don't get many customers. So for the past 2 weeks, I've been spending most of my shifts unpaid. It's ridiculous. For an 8-hour shift, I'm only getting paid for 2-3 hours of it. And get this, he keeps track of the clock in and clock out times even when he's not here. I tried to reason with him. I explained that I couldn't control how much business we got and that I shouldn't have to go unpaid just because we were slow. He countered by saying he was paying for labor and couldn't pay me to do nothing. And then he had the audacity to play the victim card. He complained about how he barely made any money running the place and how tough it was for him, mentioning that he had to get a second job. I wanted to scream. Almost everyone here has 2 jobs, including me, but I bit my tongue. The situation has gotten so bad that I've decided to put in my 2 weeks' notice today. My paychecks are suffering, and I can't afford to keep working like this. But I'm not going down without a fight. I did some research and found out that what my boss is doing is actually illegal. Employers can't make you clock out during slow periods if you're required to stay at work. So, I've been keeping detailed records of my actual hours worked versus what I'm being paid for. On my last day, I decided to confront him with this information. I told him I had something to show him. When he asked what it was, I presented the records of all the hours I'd actually worked, compared to what he'd paid me for. I informed him that what he was doing was illegal, and I was prepared to report it to the labor board if he didn't compensate me for all my unpaid hours. His face turned pale, and he started stammering. He tried to calm me down, suggesting we could work something out. I told him I wasn't interested in working anything out. I demanded what I was owed and insisted he change this policy for all employees. He attempted to plead poverty, saying he couldn't afford it because of the business's struggles. I stood my ground, telling him that his financial difficulties didn't give him the right to exploit his workers. He agreed to pay me for all my unpaid hours and promised to change the policy. I made sure to inform my co-workers about their rights before I left. I may have lost a job, but I stood up for myself and hopefully made things better for those still working there. It was a tough lesson, but I learned the importance of knowing my rights as a worker and not letting anyone take advantage of me, no matter how desperate I am for a job. My son and I had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. As a single dad, I don't get many chances to take time off work and spend quality time with my boy. He'd been begging to try out his new inflatable float, and I finally had a free weekend to take him to the coast. The day started out perfectly. We arrived early, found a great spot on the sand, and set up our umbrella and chairs. My son was so excited to get in the water with his float. I helped him blow it up and he ran towards the waves, giggling with joy. I watched him from the shore, smiling as he paddled around on his bright yellow float. After a while, another kid swam up to him and seemed to be talking to him. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but my son shook his head, and the other kid swam away looking disappointed. A few minutes later, a woman stormed up to me. dragging the other boy behind her. She demanded to know if the child in the water was my son. When I confirmed it was, she angrily accused my son of attacking her child when he just wanted to borrow the float. I was shocked and tried to explain that there must be some misunderstanding, as my son wouldn't attack anyone. The woman became even more enraged, accusing me of calling her son a liar. She was yelling so loudly that people nearby were starting to stare. I tried to calm her down, suggesting we call my son over to talk about what happened, but the woman had other ideas. Before I could stop her, she marched into the water, heading straight for my son. I jumped up and ran after her, my heart pounding. As I splashed into the waves, I saw her reach my son and grab at his float. My son cried out, asking her to stop and questioning what she was doing. She ignored him and pulled something out of her hair. It looked like a sharp hairpin. To my horror, she started stabbing at the float with it. I yelled at her to stop and get away from him. I was swimming as fast as I could, but the woman had already popped the float. My son, who couldn't swim well without it, started to panic and thrash in the water. I called out to him, telling him to hold on and that I was coming. Just as I thought I wouldn't reach him in time, a lifeguard appeared out of nowhere, scooping up my son and bringing him safely to shore. I was right behind them, ready to confront that crazy woman. But I didn't need to. As soon as we got to the beach, a crowd had gathered. Several people approached us, saying they'd witnessed everything. One witness exclaimed that they saw what the woman did and that she tried to drown my son. Another mentioned they had already called the police. The woman tried to make a run for it, but two men from the crowd stopped her. Within minutes, police sirens were blaring, and officers were on the scene. After talking to multiple witnesses and reviewing footage from a beachgoer's cell phone, the police arrested the woman. They asked if I wanted to press charges, and I didn't hesitate to say yes. An officer informed me of the charges they were bringing against her, including attempted murder, destruction of property, and child endangerment, adding that she'd be facing serious jail time. As they led her away in handcuffs, she was still shouting, claiming it wasn't fair and that my son deserved it. She also threatened legal action against us. I hugged my son tightly, beyond grateful that he was safe. The lifeguard approached us and expressed his shock at the incident, saying he'd never seen anything like it in all his years on the beach. He was glad he got to my son in time. I tried to thank him profusely but couldn't finish my sentence, overwhelmed by the thought of what could have happened. We gave our statements to the police and prepared for the upcoming trial. The woman's husband tried to pay us off to drop the charges, but I refused. Karen was sentenced to 15 years in prison, and her husband divorced her shortly after. We also won a civil suit against them, which allowed me to start a college fund for my son. It took some time, but eventually my son felt comfortable enough to go back in the water. We bought a new float and I enrolled him in swimming lessons. Now every time we go to the beach, we're extra vigilant, but we don't let one terrible incident ruin our love for the ocean. I've been working at this company for about 5 years now, and I've always gotten along well with my coworkers. We're a tight-knit group, often sharing stories about our lives outside of work. One of my colleagues, let's call him the dad, has been particularly open about his family life. He's got 3 daughters, and lately he's been talking a lot about his youngest, who's in 6th grade. The other 2 are in middle school and have started to drift away from him, as kids often do at that age. It's been tough on him, watching his little girls grow up so fast. So when his youngest daughter's birthday was coming up, he wanted to make it special. He saw it as his last chance to throw a big party before she too might start pulling away. When he told me about his plans, I could see how much it meant to him. The dad expressed his desire to do something big for his daughter's birthday. He explained that she was growing up fast and he felt like he was losing his chance to make these memories. I agreed it was a great idea and asked what she wanted to do. He replied that she wanted to go roller skating and he was thinking of renting out the whole rink for her and her friends. I thought it was a fantastic idea. His daughter is pretty popular in her grade, so it seemed like it would be a hit. He went all out booking the entire roller skating rink for the party. His daughter was thrilled and started handing out invitations to her classmates and friends. But then things got complicated. One day he came to work looking frustrated. The dad explained that the school had sent a letter home with his daughter about the party invitations. When I asked what it said, he informed me about the school's anti-bullying policy. Apparently, if you're inviting classmates to a party, you have to invite everyone or no one at all. I expressed my disbelief, pointing out that it wasn't even a school event. The dad agreed, but explained that the school was threatening to withhold privileges if they didn't comply. He mentioned a big end-of-year trip for sixth graders that his daughter had been looking forward to, and they didn't want to risk her missing out on that. The problem was, not all the kids in his daughter's class were ones you'd want at a party. There was this one kid who'd made racist comments and even threatened to bring guns to school. Another had serious behavior issues and had once thrown a chair at a group of students, sending two of them to the hospital for stitches. It was a disaster waiting to happen. I could see how stressed out my coworker was about this. He put so much effort into planning this special day for his daughter, and now it was at risk of being ruined. That's when an idea hit me. I asked the dad if he had put down a security deposit for the roller rink. He confirmed it was $200 for potential damages and asked why I was asking. I suggested that he could tell the problematic kids' parents that they need to put down a $200 deposit to attend the party to cover any potential issues. His eyes lit up as he caught on to what I was suggesting. The dad exclaimed that it was a brilliant idea and that those parents would never agree to it. I confirmed that was exactly the point, explaining that they weren't technically excluding anyone but were protecting themselves and the other kids at the same time. He loved the idea and decided to give it a shot. He sent out emails to all the parents, including the requirement for the deposit. Just as we'd hoped, the parents of the troublemaker kids balked at the idea of putting down $200. A few days later, he came to work with a huge grin on his face. The dad excitedly told me that the plan had worked. He explained that those kids weren't coming and the school couldn't say they didn't invite everyone. He added that the party was amazing and his daughter had the time of her life. I expressed my happiness that it all worked out. The dad then thanked me profusely for the idea, saying that I had really saved the day. I felt pretty good about how it all turned out. My co-worker got to give his daughter the birthday party she deserved, without having to worry about disruptive kids ruining everything. And the school couldn't say a word about it, because technically, everyone had been invited. My wife and I have been together for 13 years, married for 6. We were high school sweethearts, went to the same college, and built our careers side by side. Everything was going great until we had our first child a year ago. Don't get me wrong, we were thrilled to become parents, but the stress of balancing work and a newborn started to take its toll, especially on my wife. She's always been a bit of a perfectionist, and I could see the pressure building up as she tried to juggle her full-time job and motherhood. Tonight things came to a head. I was trying to put our son to sleep, gently rocking him and humming a lullaby. My wife came into the nursery, looking exhausted and frazzled. My wife questioned what I was doing, reminding me that she had said she'd handle bedtime. I explained that I thought I'd give her a break because she seemed tired. She then accused me of implying she couldn't handle it and asked if I thought she was an incompetent mother. I quickly denied this, saying I was just trying to help. She demanded that I give her the baby, but I refused, explaining that he was almost asleep and we shouldn't disturb him. That's when things escalated. My wife tried to grab our son from my arms, her movements jerky and aggressive. I turned away, protecting our child. She forcefully demanded that I give him to her immediately. I pleaded with her to calm down, warning that she would wake him up. She then angrily declared that if that's how I wanted to play it, she would take action. She stormed out of the room, and I heard her on the phone in the hallway. My blood ran cold when I realized she was calling the police. I overheard my wife telling the police that I wouldn't give her the baby and that I was keeping him from her. She begged them to come quickly. When the police arrived, they found me, still holding our sleeping son, trying to keep him calm amid the chaos. My wife was in tears, accusing me of keeping the baby from her. The officers separated us and asked questions. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, still in shock. After their investigation, they pulled me aside. One of the officers informed me that they would have to place my wife under arrest. Shocked, I asked why. The officer explained that based on the evidence in my statements, she was being charged with child abuse, harassment, and domestic violence. He added that it was a misdemeanor, but it was a mandatory arrest situation. I watched as they handcuffed my wife and led her away. She was sobbing, begging me to do something, but I felt helpless. The officers explained that I needed to go to the courthouse in the morning to speak with a victim's advocate and the district attorney. As I sit here now, our son finally asleep in his crib, I'm at a loss. This isn't the woman I married. She's always been loving and kind, if a bit high-strung. I know the stress of being a new mother while working full-time has been overwhelming for her, but I never imagined it would come to this. I don't want to see her in trouble with the law, but I'm also worried about our son's safety if she is prone to these outbursts. The cops gave me a card for a local attorney, and I'm considering calling first thing in the morning. I need to protect my family, but I also want to help my wife if I can. The next morning, I dropped our son off with my parents and headed to the courthouse. I was a nervous wreck, unsure of what to expect. As I waited outside the district attorney's office, I saw my wife being led down the hallway in handcuffs. The district attorney asked if I was ready to come in. I hesitantly agreed, saying I thought I was ready. I took a deep breath and followed the DA into their office. As I sat down, I realized this conversation could change the course of our lives forever. The district attorney acknowledged that this was a difficult situation and asked me to share what I'd like to see happen. I admitted that I wasn't sure. I explained that I didn't want to see my wife in jail, but I was worried about our son's safety. I asked if there was a way we could get her help instead of punishment. The district attorney informed me that there were options. They mentioned the possibility of a diversion program that includes anger management and parenting classes. However, they needed to know if I felt safe with her returning home. I paused, considering the question carefully. Despite everything, I still loved my wife and believed she could be the wonderful mother I knew she wanted to be. I expressed that I thought with the right support and counseling, we could work through this. However, I emphasized that I wanted to make sure there were safeguards in place for our son. The district attorney assured me that they could arrange that. They said they would speak with the judge about setting up a temporary protective order and mandating counseling as part of her release conditions. I knew there would be tough conversations and hard work ahead, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed we could find our way back to each other. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.